Okay, great. Well, thank you. I'm really happy to be there, even though I'm here. So, okay, I'm going to talk about, let me just give me a second. So, we're going to discuss a bit what is dialogue writing. And yes, I've just read about your new legislation, so that was very interesting and just in time for this presentation. I wanted to talk about what we adapt and for whom. A dialogue writer is the person who adapts the translation or even does the translation and then the adaptation of that translation for dubbing. Basically, Professor Frederick Schaume said that dialogue writing is the transformation of a rough translation of the dialogue into dubbing chunks or...
Sorry,
I'm sorry, yeah.
Do you have... Oh, now we have your presentation screen. You can continue.
Oh, okay, great. Can you see it?
Yeah, now we can see it.
Okay, great. So, Professor Schaume said that defined dialogue writing as the transformation of a rough translation of the dialogue into dubbing chunks or takes that respect the audiovisual constraints imposed by the medium. That's synchronies and interaction of images and words, especially to create fresh, natural dialogues that sound credible and true to life. And that's a great difficulty because if you want to create something that really sounds natural and sounds true to life, and you have all those constraints, well, that's the difficult part. So basically he talks about three constraints. One is isochrony, which is the fact that the voice talent will need to speak for the same amount of time that the original actor. Then you have kinetic or kinesic synchrony, which is the relationship between the movements of the characters on screen and what you have to say. For example, in Spanish, we say te amo, which are 2 words, for I love you, 3 words in English. So if the character is saying 3 words and pointing 3 fingers, then you will have to change your translation accordingly. And then lip sync, which means that you will need to synchronize some lip movement to your translation. Of course, that's the most difficult part because for that you will need to change lots of time the grammatical structures or even sometimes meaning. Then he adds something else, which is called dubbies. Dubbies, as we have journalese or legalese, which is the kind of phrases and words that a certain profession uses. Well, we do have the same thing. And he talks about prefabricated orality. Of course, we said that we need to sound as natural as possible. But in fact, it's not really natural. And he says, oral discourse that prefabricated orality is oral discourse that may seem spontaneous and natural, but which is actually planned, feigned, or false. It is a characteristic of the register of dubbing or dubbies. Now, what's interesting about this is that there is no dubbies for everybody, but there's a dubbies for every language, or even different variants. Because, for instance, in Latin America, where I work, we have like 21 countries, more or less, some 400 million people speaking Spanish, but with very different variants. So you also need to have a dubbies that's particularly devised for that language. That we call that neutral Spanish, which is really artificial, but it's the only way that we have to make sure that everybody will understand. Dubbies, Schaume says, is a culture-specific linguistic and stylistic model for dubbed texts. It contains repeated and sometimes outdated translation solutions like set phrases, exclamations, vocatives, etc. We'll see that in a moment. But what's more, the most important part there is that sometimes it seems or it sounds outdated. Well, so I'm going to add some other things that we adapt, or things or people that we adapt to. One of them is the audience. We said that sometimes David sounds outdated. So I particularly translate for children and teenagers, and if you use David as usual, they would find it really outdated. So you need to include, and sometimes studios are not very happy about that, you need to include new words and words that are trendy for that, particularly teenagers audience that needs to identify with that language that they are listening on TV or on streaming platforms. Then you have another person or institution that you will need to adapt to, which is the client. The client for you, the translator, is usually the studio you work for or the studios you work for, and they have different guidelines. So if you're working for one client, no problem, but if you're working for more than one client, then you will have to adapt your way of translating to what they ask you to do. And here, it's important, for instance, the glossaries that they have that include certain words that you can or cannot use, particularly when you're working for children. There are many words that are considered inappropriate, so they will tend to ask you not to use religious words or to use words related to death or killing or anything that could be problematic for a kid, or at least what they consider problematic for a kid, even if it is present in the original material, right? Which is also for children, which is the interesting part. And then you have the director. And here I'm going to include also voice talent, and we're going to talk about that. You can be working for one studio, only one studio. That's my case. But every director has a different view of what they need. So you will have to adapt your translation to your translation to what the director considers is the best way possible to translate that material. And here I'm including the voice talent. Some directors, we're going to talk about lip sync in a minute, but some directors will ask you, for instance, to adapt your translation according to the actor who's actually giving their voice to a certain character. For instance, I said I work for with children's shows, and in general, children are voiced by children as well. And some of them are very experienced and some others are not. In fact, it's kind of difficult to find children who will be voicing a series, for instance, which demands a lot of time. And for instance, I remember I had a series that I was translating, and the director specifically asked me to reduce the number of words for one of the main characters. There were two girls, and one of them was voiced by a very experienced voice talent, of course, who was a child. But the other one was new to dubbing, and they needed me to write less words so that she could actually act, because she would need to remember the lines, to follow all this lip sync and isochrony, and also to speak in this neutral Spanish, which is not the way we usually speak. So apart from everything, she would have to do all that. So she needed less words, and I would need to change my translation accordingly for one character or the other in the same program. So there are two types of director, and I think both of them are correct in their view or in their approach. Some of them are more technical and they emphasize lip sync. That means that if you have a close-up, you will need to have a very synchronized lip movements with what was the voice talent is saying, particularly because you are in a close-up. But then you have more artistic types of directors who emphasize acting and natural sounding speech. I think the best thing is to mix both things and to emphasize lip sync when you have a close-up, but to emphasize natural sounding speech every other time. And so let me give you some examples of what I've been saying. If you have an operation, a military operation that's called Operation Dawn, and in Spanish, Dawn is amanecer. Of course, you will never use amanecer for that. And you can use sol, for instance. You're not going very far from the real meaning. And you are respecting the vowel sounds. So let me get back a bit to lip sync. Lip sync is not only the combination of bilabial sounds or consonants or labiodental consonants, but also vocal sounds. So in the case of dawn and sol, that sounds very similar. And there we are emphasizing the vowel sound. In the second case, this is awesome. Okay, I work with two directors. One emphasizes bilabels all the time, so he asks me to choose words like increíble, incredible, which is similar to awesome, because of the M and the B, the concordance between the M and the B, the bilabial. And then I work with another director who emphasizes the vowel sounds. So awesome sounds very similar to grandioso, at least at the end, of course. And so he asks me to use this kind of words and not and forget about the bilabial sound. So basically, you're adapting to what the director really likes. When we talked about WEs, this is what we meant. For example, a phrase like "don't worry," which is "no te preocupes" in Spanish, has two bilabials there, so you can't use it many times. So you usually in WEs, they will ask you to use words like tranquilo or descuida, which means more or less the same. And then you have an example. Wow, just take it easy, man. That's a very meme sentence coming from a series. In Spain, the translation was, wow, tranquilo, you say tranquilo, hombre. But in Latin America, that was oye, pronounced oye, well, that would be neutral Spanish, tranquilo viejo. So you see, for everything that's wow, hey, and things like that, in Latin American Spanish, they usually would want you to translate those sounds for a word like oye. Oye means something like listen. And finally, I would like to talk a bit about what's a collaboration, which has been going on for some time now, but is totally trendy now that we are working with cloud dubbing. What we will do is two or more studios in one country will work together, or two or more studios in two or more countries will work together, mainly because they want to keep the voice that has been assigned to an actor. Suppose that an actor A has been assigned the voice of a voice talent B. So every time actor A appears in any series or movie, they would try to call actor V, voice talent V, to voice him. This is very interesting, and particularly now that we're working with cloud subtitling, with cloud dubbing, and let's take a look. This is not really new, but it's very it's like trendy right now, and it's great that we have organizations like EGA that will help put all studios in contact. That's great. I have an example here. The series was called Victim Rush, and as you can see, the dubbing was done both in Venezuela and Mexico and in the United States. And in this case, in the second case, you have a series with the two of the main actors. One was dubbed in Argentina and the other one was dubbed in Mexico, because these two people, Jake Short and Bradley Stephen Perry, came from two other series that were one dubbed in Argentina and the other one dubbed in Mexico. So they tried to maintain the voice talent that had voiced these actors before. I think that's quite nice. So, as you can see, you're not really constrained by the typical constraints of audiovisual translation, but you have to adapt to a lot more people than what you think at the beginning when you start working with dubbing. It's very interesting. It's very challenging, but I think we make a good team. And if we think about it, we're making teams with even other countries. So for me, that's really, really marvelous. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to me today.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? We do have.
Thank you for your presentation. And my question, or rather a comment, is related to new technologies in dubbing. I mean deep video synchronization, when a voice talent voices the text and the picture is synchronized with the picture in the original track, video track. I know these are just the first steps now in the development of this technology, but my question would be, have you ever observed this at work, or have you seen this introduced into any dubbing companies in your country?
Yes, not actually. I've seen that in one of my one of the studios here in Argentina. They are using that technology, and there's a very important company called SU, which I think is Mexican, that has been doing this for quite a long time, and not really. I mean, they started before the pandemics, so I think they will have a lot of experience by now. Yes.
Any more hands? Well, thank you very much, Gabriela, for your experience.